With us now is Susan Rice, former ambassador to the United Nations and former director of President Biden's Domestic Policy Council. She is now a surrogate for the Harris-Walz campaign. Ambassador, it's great seeing you. I thank you for your time. I know the Vice President is going to be delivering her closing argument speech Tuesday at the Ellipse. We're just talking about that now in Washington. It's the same spot where Trump gave his speech on January 6th before the Capitol riot. What's the symbolism of that location and of the speech there?
Well, good to be with you, Jose. Thanks for having me. I think the speech next Tuesday on the Ellipse is a critical opportunity for the Vice President to deliver a closing argument that contrasts her vision for where she wants to take the country, which is a forward-looking, affirmative, and optimistic vision that unites the country, that is full of concrete programs and policies that will benefit the American people and help them ensure that costs come down and that their freedoms are respected and protected. In contrast to Donald Trump, who used that same location 4 years ago to launch the greatest assault on our democracy since the Civil War. And, you know, Donald Trump has been very clear in the closing days of his campaign that his presidency will be about revenge and retribution and going after what he frighteningly calls the enemy within, using the United States military against his political opponents or any American who might disagree with his approach to governing. So this opportunity for the Vice President to reiterate what she will bring as a responsible rule of law respecting commander-in-chief, in contrast to Donald Trump, who launched an insurrection on the Capitol from that very spot and is promising to do worse in his second term were he to get one, is a very important opportunity for her to say her final piece to the American people.
Yeah, you know, and how important is it in the just very few days that remain, as, you know, many people, millions have already started to vote. How important is it for the Vice President to give her very clear vision of the future and then balance the look back at the past?
Well, she's been very careful and very thorough in the 2-3 months now that she's been at the top of the ticket to lay out her Vice President Harris's vision for how she will govern as President of the United States, and to make clear that she represents a new generation of leadership. She's got, you know, very concrete and useful ideas for how to help Americans not just struggle to get by, but to really get ahead in a meaningful way. Her policies on making housing more affordable, bringing down the cost of groceries by a federal ban on price gouging, her commitment to strengthen and expand Social Security and Medicare, and ensure that the Affordable Care Act remains in place and that prices for health care can come down for average Americans. Her plans and policies are very concrete and specific, and they are about the future and about the American people, as opposed to Donald Trump, who remains only about himself and has the worst kind of vague policies, such as across-the-board tariffs on 20% of all goods coming into the United States, which would cost the average American family an additional $4,000 a year. So the contrast in policy couldn't be greater. But then there's also, Jose, the contrast in temperament and the purpose of governing. We heard General John Kelly, Trump's chief of staff, 4-star general, say very clearly that he saw, in many respects, a fascist in Donald Trump. And that's what Jim Mattis has said, General Mattis. That's what General Mark Milley said. And we've heard Trump's own words that he wants Hitler's generals and he wants to govern like a dictator and terminate the Constitution and turn the U.S. military on his opponent. So the choice couldn't be more stark. It's about a forward-looking, inclusive, affirmative vision of what kind of country we can be when we turn the page on Donald Trump versus a dark past that Donald Trump wants to replicate and intensify going forward.
Ambassador, I want to turn to foreign affairs, if I could. I know you were National Security Advisor when, among other things, the United States dealt with Iran for that nuclear deal in 2015. Here's what former President Trump said about Iran in an interview with Hugh Hewitt this morning.
If necessary, will you use force to stop them from getting the nuclear weapon online, Mr. President?
Yes, I would.
So there's a very clear statement by the former president about the Iranian regime and nuclear weapons. What do you make of that?
Well, in some ways, I make very little of it. You know, that it has long been the policy of the United States, from President Obama, who I served, to President Biden, and going forward, that the United States will preserve all options and keep all options on the table to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. We had accomplished that substantially through a nuclear deal negotiated that set Iran's nuclear program back by considerable margin and ensured that there were inspectors and cameras and all of the like to see what Iran was doing. Donald Trump recklessly pulled out of that deal, had nothing to replace it, and now Iran is closer to having a nuclear weapon than it ever has been before. So keeping all the options on the table is sound policy. What is not sound policy is Donald Trump cheerleading an Israeli preemptive attack on Iranian nuclear facilities, which he did, a week or two ago. That would result in untold, destruction and a wider regional conflagration and war that's likely to draw in American personnel and forces, since we are based all over the region. That's reckless and dangerous and classic Donald Trump. But to affirm that the United States policy is to leave all options on the table to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon, that's not innovative.
And Ambassador, finally, just interesting your description of what Donald Trump, his policy is vis-a-vis Israel and Israel's response to having been subjected to hundreds of missiles and drones and all kinds of different devices by Iran directly, and then through its proxies, Hezbollah also. What do you think the policy towards Israel should be by the vice president? And do you think it would be any different from the policy that President Biden has been carrying out since the October 7th massacre in Israel?
Well, Jose, first of all, let's be clear. The United States under President Biden and Vice President Harris has not only stood by Israel in its efforts to defend itself from two direct attacks from Iran, but we participated in repelling those attacks and ensuring that the consequences were de minimis. And the Vice President and President Biden have been very clear that we will do what is necessary to help Israel defend itself against Iranian attacks, Iranian threats, and Iranian proxies. That's a different question, though, in the moment, from what to do about the war in Gaza. Now that that Sinwar has been eliminated, that Gaza, that the Hamas has been vastly degraded in the wake of its horrific attack on Israel last year on October 7th. The vice president has been very clear that it is past time for a ceasefire that enables the hostages to return home. They've been in captivity, suffering in horrific circumstances for over a year. It is well past time that they come home, that the Gazan people have the opportunity for the humanitarian assistance that they so desperately need and deserve, and that they can begin the process with external help of reconstructing Gaza under leadership that does not involve Hamas, and that the Palestinian people can truly, credibly have the prospect of their own state living side by side in peace and security with Jewish democratic Israel. That's the objective. And that's the policy that the vice president has clearly outlined. But it is time for the war in Gaza to end, and for the suffering to end, and for the hostages to come home.